Hey everybody, hope you're all doing good today. Just wanted to take a second today or a couple minutes and really go over a topic again that I've touched upon in the past on some of my posts and some of the conversations I've had on social media. And I just wanted to go a little bit more in depth on it and maybe clear up a couple things, some misconceptions, because one of the things I found out about social media is that there's two different things when you start posting content. Number one is that it doesn't matter what you talk about. I don't care. You could say, man, chocolate chip cookies are the best cookies that there are, and somebody would get on there and be insulted by it, that you actually had an opinion on it. And secondly, a lot of times people, they only hear what they want to hear and they don't hear the full story on it. So, there's some sensitive types out there that react like that to some posts. Not very many, but there's some that I wanted to get clear on this particular topic of braid to fluorocarbon, because it's something that people have a lot of interest in for whatever reason. And I'm telling you what, it's like when I voice my particular opinion on braid to fluorocarbon, and some people don't agree with it, a percentage of the people that don't, and they won't agree with what I'm going to say in this video. Some of them won't either. It's like I insulted their mom. I mean, they take this seriously for whatever reason. It's like they've got some emotional attachment to braid to fluorocarbon. And so I want to preface all that, and let you know I'm aware that there's some people that are not going to agree with this, and that's okay, because that's what fishing information is. It's basically opinion, unless you can unless you can back up what you're talking about by reproducible results. So anyway, braid to fluorocarbon, what we're going to talk about today. The first thing I want to say about this is that if you're using braid to fluorocarbon now and you're happy with it, and it's something that you like to do and you've got a lot of confidence, then by all means keep using it. Don't change, because I'm not here to try to strong arm somebody into not using it anymore. But what this video is sort of geared towards is those anglers that are maybe on the fence about it, or maybe new into the topic and not really sure about it, not really confident in it. Those are who I'm really talking to in this particular video. So here we go. First of all, I want to start out and say is, I've been fishing spinning outfits for over 50 years. That's what I started with. My dad set me up with a Mitchell 308 spinning reel and a little spinning rod, when I was in grade school. That's what he fished a lot. He had several of them. So I used his Mitchell 308 and his Mitchell 300 spinning reels to learn how to fish. And I've used spinning reels ever since. So I've got over 50 years of experience with spinning outfits. So, I've done it a lot. And like I said, it all, for so many years, people didn't use spinning tackle as much as they do now for a lot of different reasons. The tackle wasn't as good, the rods weren't as good, the reels weren't as good, and you had monofilament line a lot. And if you've ever fished spinning tackle on monofilament line, that can cause a lot of issues, But with the advent of fluorocarbon line and the smaller diameters, that got people using spinning tackle more, and techniques evolved, like drop shot and shaky head, stuff like that, so it got more popular. And then all of a sudden, and it's been probably 10 years or so now since it got popular, everybody started getting on this braid to fluorocarbon bandwagon. And the more pros started using it, and it morphed into it to where now it's like a given that everybody uses braid to fluorocarbon. And ever since it came out, I was a skeptic of it for a lot of different reasons I'm going to talk about. And I went through the same process. When it came out, I started using it, and I use Seagar, all Seagar line, Seagar and Vizex. Fluorocarbon is my main line, but Seagar also makes some of the best braided line out there. So I've had access to the top quality braided and fluorocarbon lines to do this with. But I went through the same process about 10 years ago. I started experimenting with the braid to fluorocarbon. I experimented with different knots. I experimented with different applications, and spent a lot of time studying it. And after a period of about 6 months of extensive study with it, I was convinced that it was not the best way to go. I just felt from my own experimentation and what I've seen that the negatives of it outweighed the positives on it. Because, and I'll go into that a little bit here. First of all, the first thing I found out about it is that going to braid to fluorocarbon on a spinning rod is not going to get you any more bites at all, period. It's not, if anything, it's going to take away your bites, in my opinion, simply because, and this isn't a situation all the time, but you know, anytime that you've got a braided line going in clear water, that line becomes extremely visible. And on situations where your leader gets shorter, to me, that's a visual negative to the bass, a potential visual negative. I'm not saying that, and you can say, well, I use 30-foot leaders or whatever, and I get that, I understand that. But nevertheless, it's still one potential negative that doesn't add to any more bites to you. Secondly, on that is that from what I've seen, as far as a lot of people don't really understand the strength of the braid versus fluorocarbon, and you know, you don't really have a true feel of what that is because you've got a stronger main braided line and a weaker fluorocarbon leader most of the time. And I'm not talking about a failed knot. I'm talking about just there's a little bit of variable there that you don't have to deal with in straight fluorocarbon. And thirdly is a knot. And you know, like I said, the thing that I did not like about the braid to fluorocarbon situation was the fact that I have two knots. I've always got to have, you know, tie my braid to fluorocarbon knot, and I've got to tie my lure to fluorocarbon knot. And what that does to me, not only that gives you two potential weak links, but have you ever tried, if you're in a situation where you break off braid to fluorocarbon and the wind's blowing 30 miles an hour and you're drifting down the bank, and all of a sudden you've got to retie your FG knot, it's going to take you 3 to 5 minutes to do that, and then you've got to retie your main one. And to me, there was a lot of downtime because I retie a lot. I mean, if I get the slightest fray, I cut off some line and retie. And what happens on that, as I found, is that my leader was continually getting shorter all the time. And instead of like retying both of my knots to keep my leader length at 20 feet or whatever like that, I would get lazy. And I think a lot of people do. They get lazy and they just don't retie their knots. Their leader gets shorter, and then you've got, you know, your braid in the water even more at that particular moment. So there was a negative that goes along with that. But the main thing that did it for me is that 2 years ago, I would have won the U.S. Open at Lake Mead. I would have been the 2018 WON Bass U.S. Open champion 2 years ago if it would not have been a failed knot on a braid to fluorocarbon. My partner, you know, in that particular tournament, you know, it's a shared weight tournament, so you get credit for what your partners catch too. And my partner, in that particular tournament, I wound up finishing 10th place in that tournament. But my partner, the first day of that tournament, lost two really big bass, and both of those bass broke him off. They broke his knot off on the braid to fluorocarbon. And now I'm not saying that he, you know, that they wouldn't have broke him off on straight fluorocarbon or whatever, but they didn't break his line, they broke the knot. And you know, I talked to him, and he was just like shocked. It never happened before, and he knew how to tie knots good. But that particular thing stays with me about, you know, being the Open champion if that knot hadn't have broke there. So those particular things are big negatives for me as far as braid to fluorocarbon. Now, the reason that I like straight fluorocarbon is a couple different reasons. Number one, I've got one knot to tie. That's all I have to focus on, and that encourages me to retie more. So I have fewer break-offs, in my opinion. And if I do break off or I do retie, I can do it in a third of the time that it takes me to retie my whole braid to fluorocarbon setup. Secondly, with that is I feel like I can manipulate the bait better with straight fluorocarbon, because when you're dealing with braid to fluorocarbon, you've got a lot less stretch. And there's some situations out there with some baits that I want that stretch a little bit. I need it, as far as when I want to manipulate a bait in a certain way, I need that straight fluorocarbon, and it gives me a more consistent feel all the time with straight fluorocarbon. Thirdly is that in super clear water, if I'm fishing really deep, and this, like I said, this may or may not, nobody really knows, because nobody has been inside a bass's brain to see. But I have the confidence to know that bass cannot see my line. If the water visibility is 25 foot in the body of water, I know that I've got straight fluorocarbon all the way to the bottom. And, you know, even though they may or may not be able to see the main line, in my own mind, for my own confidence, I know they can't see my straight fluorocarbon. And so those combinations, I feel like it gives me more bites than that. I feel like I know the limitations of my line better on one knot, and I just feel like I have better feel over the bait. Now, one of the big things that I will concede as far as braid to fluorocarbon, the advantage, and the only advantage that I can see about it, is that when you're fishing certain techniques like drop shots for whatever, the braid to fluorocarbon will not twist your line as bad as straight fluorocarbon. But after analyzing this myself, and after using braid to fluorocarbon and experimenting with it, I take that trade-off. I would rather have to deal with some occasional line twist and fluffs like bird's nest in the spinning reel, which you get less of with braid, you get more of with straight fluorocarbon. I would rather deal with that hassle than have to have all the other negatives in my mind to deal with, as far as to offset that. It's sort of a give and take, and in my situation, I felt that, you know, the advantages of straight fluorocarbon outweigh braid to fluorocarbon. And like I said, this isn't anything about me being a veteran angler and me being, you know, old school or whatever like that. I've experimented with it. I got the best stuff. I got the best line to use. I got the best rods. I've got all the right stuff. I've spent, you know, dozens of hours experimenting with braid to fluorocarbon. This is a scientific experiment, a decision that I've made myself based upon my own, you know, results that I've seen with it. So it's not some bias I have against braid to fluorocarbon. I simply think that straight fluorocarbon is a better way to fish spinning tackle when you add up all the pluses and minuses to it. And, you know, a lot of people like the braid because they think they can cast it farther, and yeah, you probably can a little bit, but, you know, at the same time, with the smaller diameter fluorocarbons, I feel like I can cast, you know, very competitively close as far as you can with straight braid, the fluorocarbon on there. I will say one thing about braid to fluorocarbon on spinning outfit, that I do use it in one situation. I have found, if I'm fishing a bait like say a small fluke or something like that, I take a 10-pound test braid and I put a barrel swivel on it with like a 3-foot leader, because I'm working this bait fast and the fish don't really have time to see or react to the line. And I like this because on the fluke type baits, I need a little bit more power behind it, and sometimes I do need to make that super long cast, and the braid will give me just a little bit more distance on my cast that sometimes I don't need with a drop shot or a shaky head. So I do use the braid to fluorocarbon on a barrel swivel, floating worm, fluke, that type of stuff at times with that. But anyway, the whole point of my video that I wanted to get across here is that, and I'm directing this to anglers that are sort of on the fence here. If you're on the fence about it, don't get pressured into thinking you have to do this. Just because you see, you know, all these guys up on the northern swing, Lake St. Clair, Lake Erie, they've all got the yellow and white braid on, and they're you know, peeling dirt, you know, line off their drag. You've seen the whole thing. Don't feel like you have to get sucked into that, because you don't. You can be just as equally effective with straight fluorocarbon, and in my opinion, probably more effective. And like I said, that's just this is my own opinion. Like I said, you know, if you like braided fluorocarbon, this was not meant to insult you or to make you have a bad day. But I just wanted to let people out there know that there's a lot of people out there like myself that are straight fluorocarbon advocates. And that being said, you know, I fish spinning tackle probably 50% of the time all year long. It's a big part of my system to bass fish. So I've got thousands and thousands of hours and days with a spinning rod in my hand. And for me, it's straight fluorocarbon all the time, except when I'm using those flukes for floating worms. So anyway, I hope that, like I said, I hope that that maybe shed some light on the topic, and that if you're one of those anglers that are just not comfortable with it and don't like messing with tying 2 knots and just feel like that maybe it's just not for you, then that's great. Don't do it. Go back to the straight fluorocarbon, and I think you'll be, you know, pleased with that decision. So anyway, thanks for listening, guys. Appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, hit the subscribe button at the top right hand corner of the screen here. And I really appreciate you guys listening, and we'll be back soon with another video. See ya.